So as you guys know, 2 new artifact sets came out in patch 1.5, and for support Fischl, Tenacity of Millelith is one that a lot of people have been talking about and asking me. So in this video, I wanted to clear up the confusion surrounding the artifact set and go over everything you need to know about Fischl in a complete Fischl guide. Now keep in mind this will be mainly a support or sub-DPS guide where her Oz is going to be like a DPS, but she's not going to be on the field all the time. I will include some tips for a main DPS Fischl if you're interested in that, but with that out of the way, I really just want to jump right into it. So if you're new here, I want you guys to know that I stream most nights on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested, and be sure to sub if you haven't already, and let's get right into it. Now before we talk about anything else, I want to talk about Millelith, and then we'll talk about, Fischl's talents, artifact sets, weapons, all that, just so that I can make it clear what my stance on the new Millelith set is and why it's in the thumbnail. I don't want it to be ambiguous. I want to give a clear answer as to what I think about Millelith on Fischl. The first thing I want to talk about before getting into the new set though is talk about Fischl's role as a character, as a support, sub-DPS, whatever you want to call it. Basically, she summons Oz, and Oz will deal a ton of damage, extremely high single target damage, applies electro very fast, and generates a lot of particles for your team. Therefore, she's fitted in comps as a burst support to help you deal more damage, especially single target. Now that that's out of the way, we can talk about the new set and why it's usually bad on Fischl, with some exceptions. First of all, if you don't know what the set does, Tenacity of the Millelith is a new set that gives you it gives you HP, but that doesn't matter for Fischl, but the 4-piece increases the attack of all your party members by 20% and their shield strength by 30. This lasts for 3 seconds, but you can trigger it every 0.5 seconds when your elemental skill hits an opponent. And keep in mind for this set, you don't have to be on the field for it to activate. So you press E, Oz attacks, and then it'll constantly apply the set for everyone. Also keep in mind, if you want your Oz himself to get the buff, you should use your E, let him attack, and then recall him. So that this attack buff snapshots onto him. And so now that I explained the set, you guys can see why it looks appealing for Fischl. This is a set that Oz can efficiently apply. He can use it very easily, activate it very easily, and basically just give your whole party members attack. The problem is, usually it's better off investing into your Fischl's own damage than to buff your whole party member. Now I say usually because there is one exception, one main exception, but first of all I want to say that building her other sets that give her a lot of damage, and we'll talk about this in the artifact section, but for example Thunder Soother, giving her 35% damage is so big considering how much damage your Fischl deals. Since Fischl support is basically doing as much damage as a DPS or close to it because of her Oz, losing out on this 35% damage, or again some other sets that we'll talk about later, is usually not worth the 20% attack that you'll gain to your party. And so despite the fact that Oz can apply the set fast, it's usually not worth it, because transforming your Fischl into a pure support that just kind of runs a mini noblesse set, just slightly buffing the attack of your party members instead of giving herself damage, is rarely worth it. However, as with everything in Genshin, it does depend. There are some very niche or specific situations where I can recommend Millelith, so I want to clarify this because it is nuanced and I don't want to mislead anyone. If you're giving her +0 artifacts or just low investment, you don't want to spend resources on her, and that can be worth it, at low levels and stuff, you can slap Millelith on her, she'll buff her team and you don't have to think about it. But when we're talking about best Fischl build, and when I'm giving you guys advice on how to build her, I can't advocate for this for the sole reason that it doesn't cost a lot of resources, because it isn't optimal. However, there is one situation where it's optimal, this is the exception, and that can be in a Shou comp. And even then it can depend, but giving attack percent to your Shou, making your Shou deal more damage throughout his whole burst. And remember that Shou's burst lasts a while and he wants attack because his burst gives him so much damage percent that giving attack percent is great. So I can advocate for Millelith on Fischl in a Shou comp specifically, but apart from that, for general Fischl, I think Millelith is pretty bad. In theory, if your Fischl's doing a lot less damage than the rest of your team members, let's say 5 or 10% of your team's damage, and really not contributing that much, Millelith buffing your hyper carry can be good. But in practice, the comps where Fischl shines in, and when you actually want to use Fischl, it's not really in hyper carry teams, and again, with the only possible exception of Shou. And whenever you're putting Fischl in a team, she's usually doing so much damage to where buffing her with good artifact sets and building her properly is not only worth the resources, but also better than just slapping Millelith on her. So to make it very clear, I think Millelith is only good on Fischl if 1, she's low invested, which again, she shouldn't be. 2, she's in a suboptimal comp where she's not doing much, which again, she shouldn't be. Or 3, and this is the only time it can be okay, in a Shou team. But since there's so much confusion around the set, since it's new and a lot of people think it's good, I figured that I should clarify why I think it's generally bad on Fischl and why I should put it in the thumbnail and tell everyone hey, you probably shouldn't build this unless this one situation. So the first thing I want to do is talk to you guys about some tips regarding Fischl, mainly some advanced gameplay tips, and go over her talents. She has been out for a while, so it won't just be a reading of the talents, but I'll give you guys some stuff you should know. First of all, her E is her main ability, and this is her best one by far. Basically, it summons Oz, who's like a mini DPS, who will stay out there for quite a while, 10 seconds by default, and it does go up to 12 with her Constellation 6. You gain 2 seconds here. So Oz does stay out for quite a while, and he does an insane amount of damage, 169% of her attack every time he attacks, and he attacks a lot and very fast. On top of that, you deal summoning damage, which again increases with Constellations, and this ability is pretty much why you run Fischl. You tap your E, right? You summon Oz, you swap characters, and you never have to think about her again if she's played as a support. And something important to keep in mind is that Fischl's E actually snapshots. What that means is that your buffs are calculated when you use the ability for the whole duration. Now you can resummon Oz to reset it, and I'll try to go in a bit more detail. Basically, when you press your E, if you're buffed or whatever, let's say you use Benedalt, and then you use Fischl E, your Oz will be buffed. So I hope I explained it well, but basically when you press E, all your buffs are taken into consideration. But let's say you buff your E, let's say you use Tenacity of the Millelith or whatever, and you want it to apply to your Oz, you have to resummon him, and then he'll like re-snapshot. Also, something I want to add that I forgot to mention is that Oz is a really good battery. He'll generate a ton of electro particles for the active character or for the whole team when he's out on the field. However, I will talk more about this in the party comp section because it is crucial to Fischl's viability in certain teams, notably enabling Beto to spam her burst on cooldown. Fischl's elemental burst is actually just a sort of bonus ability for me that's used to resummon Oz. If you guys don't know what this does, you transform into a crow, you move around a lot faster than you normally would, and at the end of your burst, Oz is resummoned. So I usually use this after my E. Let's say I'll use my E, Oz will be out for 10 or 12 seconds, and then after that, I'll press Q, and Oz will be back out for another 10 or 12 seconds, and then my cooldown will be up, and I'll basically have Oz out all the time. Apart from that, this burst isn't too great. I think it's kind of underrated, but like the damage it deals really isn't too much, and I mainly use it to reposition and to resummon Oz. So as you guys can see, if I use it, I can actually swap out of it. That's something I wanted to mention. And when you swap out of it, or when it just ends, Oz will be summoned, and it's really nice. Last tip regarding this ult is that it doesn't have a lot of iframes or a lot of invulnerability. So if you try to use it to dodge an ability, like you're not invulnerable during it, so keep that in mind. Your first passive is one I don't really use. You can basically aim shot Oz so that he deals some damage, but usually like this is a loss of DPS, so this isn't something I do. However, his second passive is one of the reasons why Fischl is so good. Effectively, whenever you trigger an electro reaction, so a reaction with Fischl, right, an electro one, Oz will deal 80% of Fischl's attack as electro damage. So this scales with all your buffs since it is an electro damage and it scales off of your attack. And it's especially great because, again, it's with your current active character. So Fischl can be off field. You don't have to think about her, and she'll be passively doing this damage as long as Oz is out on the field. Also, as I mentioned, keep in mind that this scales off of attack, which is one of the reasons why building attack, building crit, electro damage is so good on her, because it does not only buff her, but it also buffs Oz and stuff like this talent. Lastly, regarding her talent priority, you want to max your skill first for sure, and then your burst, and you don't have to worry about your normal attacks unless you're DPS, in which case you can max it. With that out of the way, let's talk about Fischl's best artifact sets. There are a few main good ones, and there's actually a lot of options depending on not only your team comps, but also your substats. First of all, I want to talk about Thundering Fury. Something to keep in mind is that the 4-piece set doesn't work when Fischl is off field, so the 4-piece Thunder Fury is usually not worth it. This effect won't do much for your Fischl, and so I generally recommend you run her on the 2-piece for 15% electro damage bonus, with another 2-piece, the best one usually being Glad. 18% attack and 15% electro damage bonus buffs everything your Fischl does, and is just really good for her. Keep in mind, early game or until, like let's say your Glad substats are really bad, you can run a 2-piece Gambler for the 20% elemental skill damage. However, I do feel this is kind of overrated because remember, it is a 4-star set. So even just to run the 2-piece, you'd have to sacrifice like your Feather and substats because level 4 artifacts get worse substats. So this can be good for an early or mid-game Fischl, but I would recommend switching to 2-piece Glad whenever you can. Lastly, 4-piece Thunder Soother has the most potential on Fischl, and it's what I run if I can maintain the electro uptime. I would only recommend running this artifact set if you can, as I said, maintain the electro uptimes. So let's say in an electro charge comp, or if your Fischl's C6 and you're not like removing the electro buff on the enemies, Thunder Soother can be the most damage for you. But for general purposes, 2-piece Thunder Fury and 2-piece Glad is the best and what I recommend. Also, I just want to quickly mention that the Pale Flame set is good on her if you're running her as a main DPS. But again, that's not what we're talking about in this video, and I don't think it's optimal. But if you do run her DPS, Pale Flame is good. For Fischl's artifact stats, it's pretty straightforward as of now. You do want crit the most, so on your substats, be sure to prioritize crit rate and crit damage on everything, and attack percent can be nice too. Generally speaking, you don't need too much ER on Fischl because her Oz acts as a battery, generating a lot of particles, so crit and attack are what I look for. Also keep in mind, energy recharge isn't like a dead stat. It's not bad on Fischl, but it's not as good as crit or attack, especially because of how many particles Oz generates. You usually don't need too much energy recharge. For your Sands, attack percent is great because, again, not only Fischl, but also Oz scales off of attack percent, so it's really good for everything about her. Now the thing is, I'm recording this in patch 1.5, and it's been confirmed that elemental mastery and transformative reactions, so like the electro reactions, will get buffed in the next patch. Now, I still think attack percent will be great on Fischl, but I don't know how good Elemental Mastery will be. So all I'm going to say is right now attack percent is the way to go, and Elemental Mastery, while it can buff your reaction damage, isn't what you want on Fischl overall. So I can't recommend Elemental Mastery, but again, if that changes, I'll update the pinned comment and I might make a new video. That being said, attack percent on the Sands is what you want. On your Circlet, crit rate or crit damage are both good, trying to get a 1-to-2 ratio. And for your Goblet, electro damage bonus is definitely the way to go. And just in case you guys are wondering, basically everything you're building on Fischl also affects Oz. Like, yes, he can crit. And so basically everything you're doing, except your reactions, your transformative reactions, will be critting. So building crit on Fischl also buffs your Oz and is just really good. Now let's get into Fischl's weapons, and there's a lot of really good ones. So I'm going to give you a description of all the good ones so that you can pick the best one for you based on your situation. First of all the 5 stars are pretty good on her, and the best bow overall, if you have it, is the Skyward Harp. This weapon is insane. It has a high base attack, good crit rate, and gives you crit damage, as well as a good passive. Other than the harp, the Alley Hunter is a really good bow. However, it was only like on one banner and not a lot of people have it. But if you do, it is her second best bow. It's really good, especially at high refinement, because of the passive buffing your damage when you're off field. Amos bow can be good if you have it, but it is a 5-star. If not, Stringless is amazing and it gets better with refinement. Viridescent Hunt is also a good option, and these two I rank similarly. However, Stringless with refinement gets much better because, as you know, Stringless increases your elemental skill and burst damage by a pretty significant amount. At level 1 or refinement 1, it is 24% skill and burst damage, which is pretty good for Fischl. On top of that, it gives you elemental mastery, which isn't bad for Fischl. Like, it's not her favorite stat, but it can help if you are proccing reactions, especially after the sort of reaction buff or electro buff that's coming soon. I assume Stringless will only get better. Viridescent Hunt, as I mentioned, is a good battle pass option. Something I want to add with Viridescent Hunt is that through my testing, I've noticed that Oz doesn't proc the Viridescent Hunt, so Fischl is going to have to proc it manually if you want the effect. However, even without the effect, the crit rate stat is pretty good, but if you can manage to use the effect efficiently and clump up enemies, in certain situations, it does make the bow better. Just be sure to weave in some Fischl attacks if you want the effect to proc. And your best free-to-play bet, if you want a free-to-play bow, is the Windbloom Ode Refinement 5, because you could refine this for free during the event last patch. However, if you don't have this, if you don't have a Windbloom Ode, you can just craft a prototype Crescent and you'll be fine. Also keep in mind the Rust bow isn't recommended on Fischl unless you're running her as a main DPS, then you can use it. So it's been known for a while now that Fischl has really good constellations, and so I'm going to cover why they're so good, and I'll try to keep this brief. But first of all, I want to say that as with every character I review, if I say they're good, it's usually at C0, so I'm not saying like you need C6 for her to be good. If you run her at C0, she'll be fine, but she does have amazing constellations, so I'm going to talk about them. Her C1 is a DPS constellation that only works when your Fischl's normal attacking, so for a support Fischl, this doesn't matter too much unless you're like using Viridescent Hunt and want to proc the effect. Her C2 is nice, it's just a buff to your Knight Rider, Oz, and it's pretty great. 200% of your attack as damage when you summon him, and on top of that, AoE is increased by 50%, so it's pretty nice. Your C3 and 5 level your talents. C3 is especially good, 5 doesn't do too much. Your C4 makes your burst a bit more relevant by dealing some electro damage, and on top of that, it heals your Fischl. And lastly, your C6 is amazing. C6 Fischl is like a different power level than regular Fischl. It basically just makes you better at everything. Not only does it make your Oz last longer, another 2 seconds, but Oz attacks with your active character. Okay, so whoever's out on the field, it doesn't have to be your Fischl. Oz will attack as well, joint attacks with your active character for 30% of Fischl's attack. And you guys probably know by now how good this constellation is, but it really makes Fischl an absolute monster. Oz will basically just constantly be attacking, scaling off of your damage, dealing 30% of your attack. Skills with electro damage, crit, the more you invest into your Oz, the more damage he deals. So yeah, overall, very good constellations. If you are debating pulling on a banner that has Fischl, even if you already have her, it can be worth it. But even without C6, like, you don't need them for Fischl to be good. Now we're going to talk about Fischl's team comps, and this is actually pretty important. And Fischl can fit many comps, but she's also bad in a few because she's an electro character, right? And since Oz is always out on the field, always dealing damage, let's say you're running a Diluc and you want to proc a specific reaction like Vaporize or Melt, having a Fischl out might mess that up. She might make you like proc Overload or something, and if you're not planning like an overload comp, if you're just accidentally proccing the wrong reaction, just slapping a Fischl mindlessly in a team can be very bad. So when you run Fischl in a team, you usually need to have a purpose, a reason for her being there. However, she is usually just a really strong character. So unless she's messing something up, she's usually a good fit in a team. On top of that, she shines exceptionally well in specific comps, notably being a battery for other electro characters like Beto, who has an 80 cost burst, which means running Beto without Fischl is basically unviable, or you usually don't want to do it. And so I want to go over both of those in this section without taking too much time. So first of all, as I said, Fischl can fit many comps. In characters that just need a burst support, where an electro character doesn't like mess up your reactions, I would just slap Fischl, notably in this Razor team, and she works very well. With carries like Ningguang, like Xiao, like Keqing, carries that, again, aren't messed up by electro and want a burst support attacking alongside them, right? Like Kaching can attack and then Fischl will proc her passive and Oz will attack with Kaching. It'll effectively just increase your character's damage with that off-field support. Also, especially with the overload buff coming soon, I suspect Fischl will be very good in overload comps, right? Because she applies electro so fast and off-field. So characters like Yanfei, if you're running an overload Yanfei, comps like that can work with Fischl. And as I mentioned, she's a great battery for characters like Beidou. So in a comp like this, the Fireworks Child comp, it's amazing because Child does a ton of damage and your off-field supports, Beidou and Fischl, are destroying everything. On top of that, you can use your downtime of Child to DPS with Beidou, as Fischl's Oz kills everything and generates particles for Beidou while she's on field. This makes it so that your Beidou can have her burst up practically on cooldown, even without building too much energy recharge. Also want to mention that since Fischl applies Electro so fast with Oz off-field, she is great for whatever teams need Electro reactions. So if you're running Super Conduct, Overload, or Electro Charged, Fischl can be great, especially if you pair her with, let's say, Xingqiu or Xingqiu, I'm bad at pronouncing his name. If you run them together, his Rain Swords paired with her Oz will just destroy enemies, especially single target, because they're two off-field supports that work very well together, and they'll buff whoever your DPS is, let's say a Kaching, let's say a Razor. Those comps can be amazing because of how much damage not only is your main DPS doing, but on top of that, your off-field supports are shredding everything. So this section was kind of all over the place, but it's basically because Fischl is very flexible. As long as you're not running her in comps where she's specifically not good, like there are some certain comps that need specific characters and that don't want Fischl. Apart from that though, Fischl is just pretty great, not only for her damage, but also her particles and her ability to proc reactions. And so I just want to reiterate in this video so that it's clear my stance on everything. I don't want this to be like a controversial opinion. I think I wanted to talk about Millelith on Fischl as like the primary reason of why I'm making a new guide, because so many people are asking me, like genuinely, I'm getting so many DMs of people asking how good Millelith is on Fischl. And while the answer is it depends, the general answer is you shouldn't usually build it on Fischl because in her optimal comps, when you're investing into her, it's not worth buffing your team's attack by 20%, except only maybe in a Shao team. If your Shao is well invested, giving him that attack percent can be nice. So I'm trying to do this as a PSA to save your resources, whereas if you're running her low investment, as I mentioned in the intro, sure, you can run Millelith. If not, I wouldn't, and I don't think it's worth it on Fischl, and I believe that giving her damage is much better. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. It took me a long time to make, and I literally stayed up like 3 days in a row thinking about how I'm gonna like make this video, how I'm gonna title it and stuff, because I knew like what to talk about. I knew what I was gonna say about Fischl and her artifact sets. I just didn't know how I wanted to like present it to you guys, and I didn't want to like start hating on a set. But yeah, anyways, so I hope this video is helpful. I don't normally ask for likes, but I'm scared for this video, so if you enjoyed it, let me know, leave a comment, whatever. But yeah, anyways, I hope it was helpful. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.